When Lucy Pevensie stumbles through the wardrobe for the first time, she discovers a scene that could have almost been lifted straight out of a classic Christmas card. A snowy wood, a bright, warm lamplight, and even a mythical traveler carrying a big bundle of crisply wrapped packages. And even though Lucy would soon discover that she had actually stepped into a world that was always winter and never Christmas, the holiday would end up playing a pivotal role in the adventure that lay ahead. It turns out that Christmas is a pretty big deal for Narnia, but this whole concept raises a host of questions. For one, how exactly did Christmas come to be celebrated in Narnia in the first place? And how in the world did Father Christmas get to Narnia? And why did Jadis go to so much trouble to ban something so seemingly insignificant as a holiday? Could it be that Christmas has a deeper meaning and significance in Narnia than most people realize? Well, we're going to find out today. Now, speaking of Christmas, I want to take a minute and tell you about a great gift that was recently sent to me by our friends at Summertime Studios, who are sponsoring today's episode. I recently read a copy of their graphic novel, Long Live the Emperor, the first book in the Tales of Orlando series. The story centers around a broken empire that has been torn to pieces by war and internal struggle after the death of its emperor. The future of the empire seems bleak until a mysterious figure appears, claiming to be the sole heir to the throne. Now, I always love it when a piece of fiction doesn't just entertain, but also informs, especially when the author is an expert on a particular subject. J.P. Green's expertise is medieval warfare and medieval martial arts, and it really comes through in the details of this story. I found the explanations of the military tactics and strategies to be especially interesting and exciting. Even the sword fighting scenes are based on actual medieval martial arts tactics, which often look very different than the choreographed fights you usually see in today's Hollywood films. Now, this book is currently available exclusively as an ebook and comes in several different digital formats, compatible with ebook readers, tablets, phones, and computers. That makes it a super convenient last-minute Christmas gift. You can even preload it on that new Kindle or iPad you're gifting this year. You can learn more about the series and check out a sample section of the book and even preview other projects in the works over at summertimestudios.net. Be sure to check out that link in the description below and thank them for supporting this channel. And as always, I want to thank my supporters over at Patreon for helping make this channel possible. Whether it's discussing ideas in the Discord channel, or offering early critiques and reviews of the scripts, or just supporting the channel financially, you have been a huge help to the channel this year, so thank you very much. Now, Christmas is only a few days away and we've got a lot to cover here, so let's get started. It's time to leave the Shadowlands behind and step into a world that's more real than our own. It's time to follow me into the wardrobe. When Lucy first entered Narnia, it's pretty obvious that she had Christmas on her mind. So much, in fact, that when she first laid eyes on Mr. Tumnus, the first things she noticed were that his packages looked like Christmas presents, completely overlooking the fact that she had come face to face with a real-life faun. But honestly, who could blame her? When every child thinks of snow and magic, they immediately think of the most magical time of the year, Christmas, of course. And a world where it's wintry white every day? It's almost as if the world was designed to make one anticipate, long for, or even expect Christmas to be just around the corner. But as Lucy would soon discover, this was a world that was full of deception. In fact, it was in the warm, cozy, inviting cave of her newfound friend, Mr. Tumnus, that Lucy would be shocked into the reality that nothing she experienced here was really as it seemed. And how did she discover that Narnia was not a good world? That Mr. Tumnus was not her friend, and that she was not at all safe and secure? It was when Mr. Tumnus revealed that this was a world that, because of the White Witch's dark magic, was always winter and never Christmas. That single statement was packed with deep meaning at that moment. Suddenly, Lucy understood that she was in a terrible world where the promise of something so wonderful was forever just out of reach. She realized what a cruel and sadistic creature Jadis must have been, what a bleak and hopeless place Narnia had suddenly become, where the wonderful promise of Christmas was always hopelessly and painfully out of reach. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's a real element of high strangeness in this wintry world. After all, as we'll soon discover, Narnia exists in an entirely different universe than our own. A world with a totally different history where humans were actually even considered to be mythological creatures. In this world, there was no Joseph or Mary or a manger, not to mention no historical figure named Jesus Christ. So how in the world could there be a Christmas? Well, as it turns out, and here's the obvious spoiler alert, this was not the first time humans had come to Narnia. In fact, over 1,000 years earlier, a 19th century British cabbie named Frank was accidentally brought to Narnia, where he and his wife Helen became the first king and queen of the land. And it was no doubt King Frank and Queen Helen who introduced the tradition of Christmas to the Narnians, who would continue to celebrate the tradition for nearly a millennia. Now, Christmas must have been a very special time of celebration in Narnia. In fact, it had become so ingrained in the Narnian zeitgeist that even after the very existence of humans had long been forgotten, the cultural memory of Christmas still remained. So, what did Tumnus actually mean when he said it was always winter and never Christmas? I mean, what did Jadis's magic actually do? Now, we know for a fact that the Narnian calendar doesn't follow the Gregorian calendar of our world, and so, as far as we know, in Narnia, there never was such a thing as December 25th. Still, it's important to note that during the eternal winter, time didn't just stand still. Narnians still marked their calendars and tracked their days. So, why didn't the Narnians just celebrate Christmas anyway? Well, there were actually a few elements at play in the control that Jadis had over the holiday. Now, the first was purely magical, of course. Because of Jadis's powerful magic, try as he might, Father Christmas was physically prevented from entering the borders of Narnia. Now, this is almost a mirror reversal of the magic produced by the Tree of Protection, which Aslan had used to prevent Jadis from crossing the boundaries into Narnia for nearly a millennia. And unfortunately for Jadis, her magic didn't last nearly as long as Aslan's did. Now, the witch's magic might have kept Father Christmas from entering Narnia, but that's not all it took to keep Christmas from coming to the land. You see, Jadis also exerted control over Narnia by means of the tyrannical government that she had established in the nation. Over the course of 100 years, she had established an entire national network of spies and secret police and martial law, and a climate of fear and distrust among the populace. Undoubtedly, no one would have dared celebrate Christmas under the reign of Jadis, lest they risk being imprisoned in her icy palace, or executed, or at the very worst, sentenced to live petrification. And so, through a powerful combination of magic, force, and tyranny, Jadis was able to ensure that Christmas never came to Narnia. Now, I have a confession to make, and I want to issue a public apology. You see, early on in this channel, I released an episode entitled Portals to Narnia, where I examined the various ways that people had come to Narnia throughout its history. And in that episode, I discussed the arrival of Father Christmas. Well, actually, of Santa Claus. Now, a few of you left comments protesting the fact that Santa Claus and Father Christmas are not the same people. And while it's true that originally both figures were distinct, it's also true that over time the characters have become an amalgamation. And today, most people, including my British family members, consider Father Christmas and Santa Claus to be more or less synonymous. So the question is the Father Christmas of Narnia also the Santa Claus of our world? Well, after careful reconsideration, I now believe the answer is no. Narnia's Father Christmas is in fact distinct from Santa Claus. Now, it's interesting to note that there are other mythical creatures in Narnia whose mythology became mixed and muddled up in our world, most notably fauns and satyrs, which were explicitly distinct creatures in Narnia. Now, for more on that, watch my video on the origin of Tumnus. Now, it seems that while myths and stories in our world become muddled over time, the true figures behind that mythology actually remain found in their true original representations in Narnia. In fact, C.S. Lewis tells us that when it comes to Father Christmas, while you may see picture stories of his sword in our world, It's only in Narnia that you can actually see him face to face. And so, while our Santa Claus has come to be known as a fat, jolly, sometimes even silly man whose sole concern is making toys for the children of the world, the Father Christmas of Narnia was distinctly different. He was described as being so big, so glad, and so real that to look at him made one become quite still, glad, and solemn. Now, interestingly enough, Father Christmas was historically a harbinger of the end of winter. He was a figure who heralded the coming of spring. And in Narnia, it seems that this strange bearded man, this happy voice in the wilderness, played a role similar to our Elijah or John the Baptist. Yes, he knew his work was serious. And the Father Christmas of Narnia wasn't the kind to just go around giving silly toys as gifts. You see, Father Christmas knew what was coming in the days ahead. And when the winter would thaw and the battle between good and evil would come to a head, he wanted you to be ready. And so instead of mere self-indulgent distractions, he gave gifts that he knew were going to be important tools of service during those times. They were not only intended to be used for the good of the receiver, but for the good of others as well. Peter's sword wasn't to be used as a tool of force to advance his own interests. It would be needed in order to fight for Aslan and his fellow Narnians. Susan's horn, it wasn't to be used simply for her own protection. It was to be used when the entire camp of Baruna was threatened by Magram and his police. And many centuries later, it was even blown to help Caspian in his time of need. Even the gifts to the Beavers served as prescient tools of service. For example, Mrs. Beaver's gift of a sewing machine. It would need to be used to create warm weather clothing for Narnians who had lived for generations with only winter clothing. And Mr. Beaver's newly repaired dam? It would serve as an essential role in the ecosystem of a newly thawed Narnia, protecting everything downstream along the Great River, from preventing flooding in low-lying lands like the Dancing Lawn to calming the swift currents along the town of Baruna, and even preventing the erosion of the land surrounding Cair Paravel. But perhaps the most obvious gift of service would be Lucy's cordial, which will be used to save the lives of countless Narnians throughout Lucy's many years in Narnia, even centuries later. Yes, these were real gifts of Father Christmas, gifts used in service to Aslan, for the good of all who lived in Narnia. Because Father Christmas knew, yes, even in receiving, it is still more blessed to give than receive. And now we've come to the biggest question of all. Why exactly, of all things, was Christmas banned in Narnia? What was it about that particular holiday that Jadis hated so much? Why was it to her advantage to abolish this holiday? Well, first and foremost, there was the crucial element of population control. You see, as a military dictator, Jadis utilized the basic dictator's tools of censorship, propaganda, and repression in order to seize and maintain power. And by banning something as good and pure and simple as Christmas, Jadis was able to test the loyalty of the citizenry, all while demonstrating her absolute power and authority over the land. But for Jadis, her reasons for abolishing Christmas went much deeper than this. And the true reason was one that, though she would never admit it, she had been fearing ever since the dawn of Narnian time. You see, long ago a prophecy had been given, one that spoke of the coming day when Aslan would return. Jadis would be conquered, and the sons of Adam and daughters of Eve would once again rule Narnia. Wrong will be right when Aslan comes in sight. At the sound of his roar, sorrows will be no more. When he bares his teeth, winter meets its death. And when he shakes his mane, we shall have spring again. When Adam's flesh and Adam's bones sit at Cair Paravel enthroned, the evil time will be over and done. It was this prophecy that caused Jadis to relentlessly cast Narnia into an eternal winter, because as the prophecy clearly stated, if winter came to an end, so would Jadis. Now, what Jadis didn't understand was that her magic was never strong enough to keep spring at bay, or to keep Christmas out of Narnia forever. Because the thing that would break the winter was the arrival of Aslan. And Jadis's winter could never keep Aslan out. No, he came because of the winter. He came to save his people from their captivity to this tyrant. And at the sound of his roar, sorrows will be no more. And like the prophecy of Isaiah in our world, the people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. You see, when he came, he brought Christmas with him. Because whether it's in our world or in Narnia, Christmas always was and always has been a sign that winter has met its death. Because now, the King has come.